Lichtenberg U, the essential knowledge for Lichtenberg. Today's topics. One, we're going to review the number one risk factor, the inadvertent earth ground of the secondary. Number two, introduce the electrical model of the workpiece and review the Lichtenberg process. Number three, discuss probe design considerations for performance and safety aspects. And four, an introduction to Lichtenberg University. Why it's important to get a much higher level understanding of this process because of the risks involved. Okay, topic one today is to review the number one risk factor. That's the inadvertent earth ground of the secondary that many people leave. There is a video that covers this in detail. It's the previous video is not as good as this one. It's called Lichtenberg 2. And we'll try to get the videos a little bit better for you. Okay, this is our review of this unintended ground. If you look at the transformer in that schematic, there's an earth ground which is made inside most microwave ovens. If you incorporate it into your Lichtenberg device, it can be extremely dangerous. It creates many more pathways to ground. As I just mentioned, there's a video, Lichtenberg 2. I will try to improve the video quality on each of these, but Lichtenberg 2 talks about this in greater detail. It's worth understanding how multiplying the number of current return paths through this accidental ground increases danger a significant amount. A factor of 10, maybe 100. So it's very important that you understand this and remove that secondary ground to the transformer frame. Later, in just a minute, we'll be speaking about how to deal with that lead since you no longer can just bolt it to the transformer and essentially to your case and so forth. Okay. Now, let's move on to the good way to do this. Okay, the good way is like so. We have, notice at the terminal B on the secondary side of the transformer, we have cut that lead. Once again, please refer to Lichtenberg 2, the previous video. This essentially shows some of the good ground currents, or good burning currents, which because we have eliminated all the many of the dangerous pathways, return pathways, has increased the safety of the process quite a bit. And it also ensures that your Lichtenberg board, your workpiece, will see the maximum voltage and current. So that's a performance increase that's available by eliminating that ground. That's enough on that for our review. Now let's move on. Okay, in this next segment we're going to introduce an improved electrical model of the workpiece and review the Lichtenberg process. This will help quite a bit in understanding later probe design, other safety considerations, even what you can expect from different sort of wood and wood conditions. Okay, this is our improved model of the workpiece. After quite a bit of thought and a little bit of analysis and so forth, I mean mathematical analysis, not some crazy liberal opinion of what to make of some political situation, right? This is the improved model. Now, if you go back to the good way and the bad way models, they showed a simple branches, simple current paths consisting of one column of resistors. But this is actually far closer to what you have in reality. This model also shows a couple other things that we'll be talking about. Insulation integrity, some probe issues, And both of those are complex topics. So we're only going to talk about probe issues at the end of this video, just to keep the video relatively short. Now, on this topic that we're speaking of now, which is the new model, this, you think of your piece of wood that you are going to Lichtenberg, you're going to burn it. Think of it as a bunch of cells of a tree. That's exactly what it is. It's dead cells of a piece of lumber or wood that's been dried and processed in some manner. Each of those cells is connected to many, many other cells, and it forms a network that's somewhat equivalent to what you see here. Now notice the two probes have been attached differently in this model. They've been put someplace on the board. That array of resistors is essentially your board. And there are little continuation lines in the middle of it which show that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of these resistors. You can only show so many clearly on a schematic, so this is the way we've represented it. The important point is, and what you can see from this schematic is, as current flows through any given current path, let's back up a second. How many current paths do we have through this array of resistors? The answer is a very large number. That's something that can actually be calculated, but since we never know truly how many cells are in a piece of wood and how many fractions of a cell and how deep the wood is, how they overlay, they're extremely complex. They're not regularly laid out like you have here. That comes into play here in a minute, the complexity of these cells, these tree cells. I'm talking the ones that we may have seen in a biology class at some point back in high school, where plant cells, human cells, animal cells, they're all different, but the point is, when they're connected together in a blob, such as this, a big array, and it's three-dimensional now, keep that in mind. This is only showing 2 dimensions of it in a simplified form. But as current travels from one probe tip to the next, it has many, many, many pathways. Each resistor between those probe tips and surrounding the direct connection between the probe tips. If you draw a straight line between one probe and the other, on this drawing right here, those are only a few of the resistors that are involved in the current distribution throughout your wood piece. Now, since a straight line does show the fewest number of resistors, that would normally be the first path to burn out. But keep in mind, very important, each of these resistors has a different value. That value changes depending on many factors, but some of them are how consistently the wood is dried, whether it's a sap cell from the sap part of the wood, or whether it's from the bark of the wood or from the heartwood. All those cells will have different electrical characteristics. When you spray the electrolyte solution, in other words, the baking soda solution, on the wood surface, of course that creates favoritism towards the cells on the surface, or the little resistors in this. So what happens? And now we're getting into how Lichtenberg actually creates its patterns. What happens is the electrons leaving terminal A are being pulled with a tremendous amount of force across the wood, through the wood, by terminal B. Okay? As these electrons are pulled, higher numbers flow through the paths of least resistance. They have a higher, what's called a current density. All the alternate pathways surrounding the primary pathways have lesser resistances, so they do get current as soon as you hit the switch. Every single pathway gets current, but the amount of current through each pathway varies with effective resistance of that pathway. It's very difficult to model mathematically, and we're not going to get into that here. It's just not practical or really that useful. What is useful to know there, though, about this is that the pathways which have the highest current density, in other words, the pathways of least resistance, we've all heard that phrase before, current follows the path of least resistance. Now let's correct that, though. More current follows the path of least resistance. Current also follows paths of greater resistance. However, the power dissipated across those pathways is less. Therefore, they do not burn out. It's the individual resistors in the pathways of least resistance that vaporize and literally turn into smoke before your eyes. And as soon as that resistor is gone, or that cell in the wood, other cells take its place. Other cells become parts of the pathways of least resistance. They're instantly vaporized. This process goes on and on and on, and this is why things branch out as the current is finding the paths of least resistance. And more specifically, what you're interested in is the current is finding the resistors, or the cells, in those paths of least resistance that are the least resistance themselves. That causes them to essentially vaporize before your eyes. Okay, let's let that soak in for just a second. Take a quick pause here. Okay, now what was just said up to this point is worth listening to again. I will try to say it more clearly as I get more practiced at making these videos. Now, let's just take a quick second and say that understanding that what was just said about the cells and these individual resistors blowing out and how that starts to form up a Lichtenberg pattern is fairly important, because a lot of people are going off on a completely wrong tangent in their probe design. They've made a false assumption that using their probes like artists' brushes, the small diameter handheld probes that you see, are somehow superior. They are not. It is true that they concentrate the point of initial current to a fairly small region. But as the Lichtenberg pattern burns out from that region, it's on its own. Only the very, very, very first few burns in the immediate vicinity of those fine probes have anything to do with the diameter of the probe. It's a very small amount. The branching out of it, the beautiful branches that form, have a lot more to do with the nature of the wood, the resistances of the very microscopic portions of the wood that are equivalent to the resistors in this diagram. So this is going to segue us into our final topic, and then we'll come back and wrap this all up. But the final topic is some considerations for probe design. Okay, next we're going to discuss probe design considerations for performance and safety aspects. And I've removed a couple of screenshots from various YouTube videos. Only one of these, I think the person is really trying to be aware and conscientious of what they're dealing with. The other ones tend to think they have a lot more control of the situation than they do. But very quickly, before we get into these probes, here's a typical transformer in a box build. Really, the ones that are in nicer cases and so forth are all just fancier versions of this. They have the same flaws. They are very tricky. They make you think that they're much better or safer, but they're not necessarily. In this box, I can't really tell if he's left that connection to the from the secondary to the transformer frame, but I suspect he has. Just based on the general lousy quality of things, this guy does not know what's going on. Okay, now we can get into probe considerations a little bit. This is that previous box, build-in-a-box you saw. The one lead is getting quite a bit more current, more activity than the other one. This may be an indicator that we've got leakage currents returning through the earth ground to the transformer secondary. It might not, but it might. And but note here the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, he's got nails in place. People don't typically do that, but it does give at least some fixed spot where the probes, in this case alligator clips, which lose their ability to grip when they're heated because the springs lose their temper. So that's quite a problem with alligator clips, and yeah, this isn't even near something you would want to do, but the point here is that one would think you would have a nice, more or less straight line between the 2 points where the voltage is coming in contact with the board. But notice how it's going out around the corner there. That's another indication to me that this has got leakage currents returning to ground, or to the transformer secondary through the earth ground in the unit. And it also it could show variations with resistivity within the wood, but that's a little bit off center there. It's more likely he's got some contact with the wood and ground over on that side. Okay, this guy I think is worth spending some time on. He's really trying and doing a pretty good job of moving himself ahead in terms of the safety and his ability to control this burn. But remember, okay, there's a number of things on this one. Let's go back a second and remember that we can only control the burn within a grotesque kind of a way. Ultimately, the control of the burn is up to the wood itself and the micro resistances of the resistances of the little micro regions that within the entire piece of wood. So you could very easily have this burn some crazy pattern that ends up covering the entire piece of wood. It's not necessarily going to burn in a straight line between the two. It will tend to if the wood is very consistent. But if you have a grainy piece of wood with a beautiful grain and variations in grain, you know, along with those different types of wood that form the grain, the saps and the orientations of the cells and so forth, you look at oak with cross grain. That should be interesting. In any case, the point is, he's attempting to get a little bit of control here, might or might not. Now, more about this one. These alligator clips as a probe type. Oh man, those heavy leads are completely a waste of time because this typically is less than an amp. 2,000 volts output at an amp is 2,000 watts of power being applied, which is quite a bit of power. Depending on the current, limiting on the input of your transformer and so forth. I'm going off a little bit too far here in describing the amount of power involved, but certainly this type of lead is not a good choice. It does not require such a heavy lead, which becomes cumbersome and may dislodge your clamps. Once a burn is started, the red clamp there I would keep a close eye on, because once the burn is started, and it does burn into the wood a little bit, especially if the springs get overheated. In a big clamp like this, the springs probably won't get overheated as they would in an alligator clip in the previous example. But that heavy wire puts a strain on the clamp and on its ability to hold on. There's gravity acting on all that copper, pulling on that clamp. So that's something to consider for probe design. Also here, well, let me pause a second. Okay, also here, note the screws for the black lead. This is not practical for every design. It is a good thing for safety, and if your particular idea lets you do something like this, that's something to keep in mind. But bear in mind, the screw, no matter how deep the screw is, the current will eventually burn out the area around the screw. Think back to our model. I might repost that for a second, but you can scroll back to our electrical model of showing the resistances, the thousands and thousands and thousands of resistances, which are basically the cells in the wood. That's how we're going to consider them. The screw will, it may or may not direct your burn in that grotesque fashion that is somewhat possible. Okay, now on the leads. So the main things here are the heavy cables are not necessary. The clamps can be pulled off, cause safety concerns. But I do want to give a shout out and congratulations to this guy. At least he's got a foot switch and operates away from the unit. The issue here though is, I've reached out to this specific user asking him if he's got a connection from either the black or the red lead to earth ground in his box. Because if it is, the plastic mats under his sawhorse and the plastic mat under the workpiece are going to provide some protections, but still, earth is essentially live. There are additional pathways available to electrons wanting to leave the red lead. That if the black lead fails, those electrons are able to get to earth and go to the user, get to the user and return to the box from the user. Now he's isolated himself pretty well here, but eliminating that ground that connection inside the box from the one secondary terminal to the transformer frame will improve his safety even more. Okay, this one almost speaks for itself. This is an example of movable probe types. Some thin strips of wood screwed together in such a way it looks like he was trying to build a pantograph from the wood, which had a very good intention. But he got lazy, picked up his woods, decided I'm going to burn this thing, and I'm going to create these pathways by brushing on a little bit of the electrolyte along a geometric design which he had laid out. What this shows, though, clearly, this clip, notice the burn pattern is supposed to be, there's a wet area. There's a wet area between the two probes. He's trying to get it to burn in that direction. This is a perfect example of the wood will go the way the wood is going to go. You're very limited here as to what you can do to control the burn direction. I'm not saying it's not possible, but there are a lot of factors which are beyond the scope of this particular video. What I did want to point out, though, is that this probe design is obviously enormously dangerous. Electrician's tape holding the leads onto a little screw there. It looks like a drywall screw. Okay, this is total, absolute amateur hour. And it's somebody who thinks they have control of the situation here, and Mother Nature is not going to respect this person at all. Very, very little, limited amount of knowledge this person has about the way electrons flow in materials. That's an entire field of science that's well studied, and he doesn't even have a clue the field exists. I'm sorry, I do not, I get a little bit mad at these people. I shouldn't. But the problem is that regular, good, honest people see this kind of work and they somehow think, oh, this guy got away with it, it's okay, it's normal. They do it, and so far, you know, in the 30s, the people dead on this. That's why we want to, well, never mind. I'm getting ahead of myself to why I've set up this sort of Lichtenberg U-type thing. Okay, here's one where somebody else is trying to show you how well they can control the burn. You notice that we've got electrolyte spilled all over the place, but the topic here is really the probe design. This is a common probe design. It's about pretty wicked dangerous and provides almost no control of anything, and at the expense, extreme safety expense. So you're spending a lot of risk to gain nothing. Okay, let's just say that's not the intention here, and I am controlling myself and not using derogatory words to describe this type of practice, but please forgive me, it is difficult. Now, the probe types, these are nails clamped into battery booster cables. The insulation types have not been checked out here at all. These are battery booster cables. It's typically a plastic cable. It's very difficult to find the good old-fashioned battery booster cables, jumper cables, that had actual serious rubber cable, rubber insulation, which if it's been cracked, used, spilled oil on and so forth, plastic or rubber, they can deteriorate, they can crack. Cold weather especially, the plastic ones can crack. You notice here that he has put some additional form of insulation, some sort of piece of PVC tube likely, on there to give himself a little bit more protection. But there he is, barehanded. Okay, and speaking of probe design, let's go back just a second to our model here of a piece of wood. Note in the model here, there are green lines for the leads. This depicts the copper in the lead, which can be very fine. It would be better to favor the insulation quality than the copper diameter, because only here, this is a 1600 watt unit, pulls 15 amps from 110 volts. Neglecting a very small amount of loss, we're delivering about 0.8 amperes, a little bit over 0.8 amperes to our device under test, or under the burn. If we have eliminated the chassis ground, as we've shown here, 100% of our power, assuming good insulation on the cables, is being delivered to our workpiece, and we do not have leakage currents. Now, let's talk about this insulation. Outside of the green lines on our leads there are some blue lines representing the insulation. The yellow circles, or orangish circles, where the leads go into the box, depict an area that's very important, where we need to be sure that we don't abrade our insulation going into the box, we don't crack it or break it, or cause some kind of a short against the box. In this regard, plastic boxes have an advantage, but plastic and metal boxes are a topic for another conversation. Our leads proceed back through to terminal A and terminal B. How those are attached such that you can't damage the connection is very important. And maintaining that insulation quality the whole way back through, regardless if the box is bounced around. Think of this as sort of like an attachment on a missile. You shoot a missile from a plane at your enemy. It undergoes an enormous amount of vibration. Same thing here. If you drop your box on the floor and those leads break in the wrong way, your transformer breaks loose, it could possibly pull on your lead, your probe, on your workpiece. Many things can go wrong with a shock situation, a mechanical shock to this device. I don't mean an electrical shock, I mean a mechanical shock. So, how things are arranged in that box is important as well. So this is a topic for the next time we do this. And that's all for segment 3. We're going to move on to segment 4 now, why we have this particular program under development. Okay, we're at our final segment here now. Introduction to Lichtenberg U. This is basically, I think, why it's important to take this to a more professional level. And, well, let's just get into it. An introduction to Lichtenberg U. Okay. This Lichtenberg process, well, I think there needs to be something like what I'm doing here, this Lichtenberg U. And let me just tell a quick story about what changed my mind on the thing. You know, when I saw this process and what people were doing with it, I realized how dangerous it was, because I'm a retired electrical engineer. I've got 48 years experience in military, medical, consumer goods, scientific instrumentation, a lot of stuff. So a lot of water over the dam here, and a lot of that work was specifically related to design such that it would meet all regulatory standards. This includes mil spec, FDA, okay, CE, UL, of course. So I saw what people were doing, and I got on and decided I better put some warnings out there. And there were some interesting comments, not in response to my warnings or anything, but one person said they realized there was a danger, but how could you resist it? It's so fun. And that struck a nerve with me. Being an engineer and loving to build things myself, it really struck a nerve with me, and I thought, yep, you can warn these people all you want to. They're still going to try it. That's part of the innovative spirit. And something else was said about that, about, this is how the world makes progress, is taking risks and innovating. So it made me realize that, you could tell people don't do it all you want to. They're going to do it. So it sort of raised the gauntlet. Can this be done safely? And I thought, well, if one could understand the problems at the fundamental engineering levels that are needed in this is unlike many other problems, as all the professional engineers out there can tell you, especially the ones that have had involvement in the fields I have. And I'm going to make a plea to you in just a second. But those people will realize that the current crop of people out there on the web trying to build these kinds of systems and to show people how much they know, that's what they're doing. Trying to get hits, trying to get likes and so forth on YouTube. And the problem that's creating is it's creating a false impression, this partial knowledge, just enough knowledge to be dangerous, is all these people need to impress the heck out of other people. Good old people are just trying to make beautiful woodworking projects and have some fun. The impression they're creating is that this can be done safely if you just do it exactly like I do. And the comment's been made many times, do it exactly like I do. I've done this hundreds of times, and I'm still here. We realize, I'm speaking now to the professionals, we realize what a crock of BS that is, and how they're basically, by wanting likes so badly, some of these YouTubers are leading other people to their deaths. It's not right. It's just not right. So here's my appeal. Any project like this, it's always best to involve as many good minds as you can bring to the table. People that know how things work at the fundamental level and have seen things go wrong. So, specifically, it'd be great to get older engineers or retired engineers that are sitting around watching this stuff and thinking, yeah, this is interesting, I'd kind of like to build one. And I think you can probably build a better machine than any of these things out on the web. So I'd like to invite you to please comment. Please comment, make yourself be known, reach out to me somehow. Because I think a little collaboration on this can provide so much to the guys that just want to make some beautiful woodwork and try to have fun with it. My criteria is if it could be made as safe as a table saw, if we could come up with first the design parameters, how it works, the theory, talking about all the different trade-offs that you have to keep in mind before you actually design some kind of a solution. Not saying it could be done cheap, but it's possible. It is possible with enough work on the design side to come up with something that's, and it's not just the box, what's in the box, it's how the box is used. The operators are a key part of this, and it's using it safely, just as with a table saw. You've got to be very careful about many things. And I guess one final parting comment. There is a fellow out there who is making a pretty looking box that's commercially available for sale. I didn't even price it. I looked at it kind of closely to determine what I could from the exterior, and I've requested information about it. Does it have any agency approvals? Does it use as either side of the secondary common with earth ground? What kind of recommended operating procedures come along with it? What kind of certifications on all the materials are available? That's all covered under agency approvals. No response. No response. So essentially, we've got a guy out there. I'm gonna go ahead and use a derogatory and call him a joker. It's like a snake oil salesman. You know, some of the old snake oils were poisonous. Abe Lincoln was known to be taking little blue pills for his depression or something, which at the time they thought mercury was good for you. And I think that's a very good, pretty good metaphor for what this fellow is doing. He's selling, you know, if he won't even come forth and say that he's even at least trying to get UL approval for his device, then he's just trying to cash in quick. And I don't have a problem with people making a buck, but I don't like hucksters. So I think having good general knowledge among the user base here, so they could, you know, spot hucksters. And if they are going to insist on building their own machine, at least to have some good ideas on the table and a community of people, not all professional engineers by any means. There's a lot of good users out there who can build things and try things and come up with good ideas, especially mechanical ideas for things. Very many practical ideas can come from anywhere. Now they've got to be looked at by professionals in the context of certified materials, construction methods, things like that, to make sure that everything holds up to its specifications and its potential. And I've gone on quite long enough. Happy burning, folks. I hope you subscribe because, you know, and comment because, you know, that's, otherwise I'm going to lose interest in this. You know, I will. I'm retired. I can do anything I want. But I do think I might give this a shot. But if I do, it's going to be done as to an absolute order of magnitude or two better than the crap that you see out on the web as of February 1st, 2024. You saw a few of those clips just a minute ago. That's not even the worst of it. And there's hundreds of guys out there doing this stuff. With more general knowledge, it's a lot easier to laugh at them and maybe sort of poke them in the right direction so that their wives and kids don't have to cash in on their life insurance policy. I hope it's paid up. Take care.